Well, Venezuela has one of the largest oil reserves on the planet, and that has many in the energy sector keeping a close eye on the potential impacts after the weekend attack by the U.S. Robert Johnston is the Director of Energy and Natural Resources Policy at the U of C School of Public Policy. RJ, thanks for taking time for us this morning. And I guess let's just start with kind of painting a picture of what's happening in Venezuela. Give us a sense of how big this oil reserve is and the state of production in the country.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's definitely the world's largest oil reserve. It's about 300 billion barrels, which is just a little bit less than twice what we have in Alberta. And that's just the proven reserves. It's estimated there could be over 600 billion barrels if you applied some different technology to some of the extra heavy fields there as well. So it is a very substantial resource, but the production levels, of course, have been severely constrained by all the political unrest there over the last 15 or 20 years.
And so how important has Venezuelan production been for some of the U.S.'s bigger adversaries like China, Iran, and Russia? Has a lot of Venezuelan oil been going in those directions?
When the U.S. industry left, when these socialist governments came to power kind of in the early 2000s, China and Russia did attempt to step in. The Chinese did lend the Venezuelans a lot of money. In return, that money was supposed to be paid back by oil. But honestly, the Chinese and Russians were not really able to make a go of it for a lot of different reasons. They were basically able to keep production only really at about 20% of where it was at the peak. So about 3.5 million barrels a day at the peak in the early 2000s. Now less than maybe 1 million barrels a day. But this is important. Most of that oil is going to China, probably 800,000 barrels a day or so. So it is a small but significant source of crude supply for the Chinese in particular.
Okay, let's talk about this in the context of Alberta, and especially in the context of this trade war that's ongoing with the U.S. right now. As I understand it, Venezuela has a similar heavier crude to us, and I'm just wondering what kind of leverage will that give the U.S. over us, given that so much of our oil right now is going to the U.S. for refining in those refineries that are made for that heavy oil?
Yeah, so I think you're right. The Canadian barrels and Venezuelan barrels are similar quality. There's refineries in the U.S. that have been built specifically to process those heavy kinds of barrels. And frankly, I think what the Trump administration wants is both. They want the Canadian supply and the Venezuelan supply. And the reason for that is that will lead to lower prices. That will mean competition for market share. And that means that the price that we get here in Alberta from those refiners down in the U.S. will probably be lower than it is today. It's a good news, bad news scenario. The good news is there's only a little bit of oil available right now. Maybe some of that oil that's going to China might get diverted to the U.S. Gulf Coast and create some competition for Alberta. The real question is, in the longer term, can Trump and the U.S. industry get Venezuela back to where it was, 20 years ago? Because that would be a much more significant impact on our pricing here in Alberta, and would sort of reinforce the need for us to build more links to other markets like the Asia Pacific.
Yeah, and just about out of time, RJ, but what could that potentially mean for the stability of the global supply?
Well, of course, it's supply and demand equation. I think we're a long way away from seeing enough oil from Venezuela that would truly disrupt the current market balance.
Okay, great insight. Very much appreciate your time this morning, RJ. That is Robert Johnston from the U of C's School of Public Policy.